So, welcome everyone to another one of our monthly My Speaker Business community calls. And as you know, this is a time for you to get introduced to an incredible speaker and thought leader and change maker. And today I can tell you we have an incredible guest, and I tell you all about her in a minute. But as you notice, My Speaker Business calls are really about bringing our community together, giving you an opportunity to learn from someone, pick up the hints and tips right away to make your speaking and your business flourish further. And again, a lot of you are here from the US normally, have a nice morning time with us, or a nice lunch time, or a nice evening time, as we have people from Asia often with us as well. So welcome everyone. And as you know, every time we have an amazing guest, with us, and that guest is obviously stands for a certain topic. And the guest that we have today, she's a really special lady. She's a friend of mine. She's an amazing, speaker and thought leader. And, I met her as we are both members of the Evolutionary Business Council. And today she's going to talk with us and to us about how we use our voice more to be the change we want to create in the world and to pioneer change. And, again, you probably remember about a year ago when we were just all hit by COVID for the first time and life seemed upside down already. There was another conversation that started to surface, and that was the conversation about race, racism, diversity, and inclusion. And it didn't surface, it resurfaced because we had this conversation long time. And I don't know about you, but a lot of us, since then have really tried to, do our best to show our support by, becoming more inclusive, by including a person of color, on their website, or changing the language in their mission statements, or bring more people of color into their teams, or, work with more of them. And you know what? Sometimes a lot of us really went the extra mile to show that, we can, yes, indeed, we want to work with people, we hired employees. The question is that enough to bring real change? Well, I would say no, right? It's only the beginning. And the question is, what can we do as entrepreneurs? What can we do as speakers to really create and trigger that change and be pioneers of change? How do we as speakers really address equity and inclusion and racial diversity into our presentation with those, with these topics being the central theme about what we speak about? And as I promised you, today we have an amazing lady with us. Her name is Reverend Dr. Terrlyn L. Avery. And as I said, she and I know each other through the Evolutionary Business Council, where recently she was leading an incredible conversation with another friend of ours on exactly these topics. And it touched me deeply. And this is why I since then I thought, like, I would like to introduce her to you to speak about these topics to us. So who is she? She's the creator of pastology, the cutting edge field that focuses on the synergy between pastoring and psychology. She calls herself a pastologist, which I love the word, by the way, Terrlyn. Okay, and she is a transformational and spiritual leader and advisor. She's been, a renowned TEDx speaker and, a celebrated author. Terrlyn Avery really works with highly influential and committed leaders who need spiritual and psychological support as we all transform the world by creating a legacy of service, prosperity, and greatness. She really also has a unique approach to healing, transformation, and manifestation. So, also if you want to manifest something in your life, she's the one you want to talk to. She really places the emphasis on our journey towards sacred intelligence, our ability to tap into our internal sources in order to move toward making more intelligent choices. And, especially the choices are really intended to honor the sacred in us and then help us manifest our greatness while simultaneously embracing the humanity to those around us. Okay. She's also the author of Sacred Intelligence, the Essence of Sacred Selfish and Shared Relationships, and she will be publishing her second book this year about dismantling racism with sacred intelligence. So I think without further ado, Terrlyn, it's amazing to have you today. So let's get going on this amazing conversation. How did you start as a speaker? How did you really tap into this topic? Why don't you share with us your own journey? Welcome.
Well, first I'm going to say good morning from my part of the world in the United States. And I'm saying good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there. And I am so excited to be here and so excited to talk to you about a topic that's very dear to my heart, but talk to you about ways in which we can begin to be more inclusive, understand one another just in our everyday language, so that when we are speaking professionally, it will be just like butter and roll off the tongues for us to be able to speak with authority and with certainty about this area. But before we do that, there's something I really want us to take a moment to do. So whether we are listening to this or outside of this conversation, or just in this space, I'm going to ask us to do something, and that is to center ourselves and just for a moment, just to really take in a very, very deep breath and hold it for a second and then let it out. Take in another deep breath and hold it for a second and let it out. And then I just want you to breathe normally, but to be very conscious of your breath. And then I want you to add to that, putting your hands over your heart and feeling your heartbeat, connecting that heartbeat and that breath to whatever sacred source you honor, whether that be God, creator, universe, nature, or oneness. Feel that heartbeat and breathe in and know that you are full of life. You are a divine being meant to share your greatness with the world. So I just want you to breathe that in. And then I just want you to mentally connect with either the people who are present in this conversation we're having today on screen. Mentally connect with the people in your home or your community. Send out good vibrations of love and light for all that you will meet or talk to, even within the next hour. Feel your breath, feel your heartbeat, and settled into the power of who you are and your ability to shine your light into the world. Deep breath in and release. And you may open your eyes. Wow. How great is that? To settle into who you are and to be able to express that to the world. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am so that you get the full scope of why I do the work that I do. I am a Southerner. So I'm born in the United States, and there's a big difference between the South and the North. And historically, in the United States, the South had a lot of racism. It was where people were enslaved. I share that background with you because I was born into the heart of that. I was born 45 minutes from where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. I was born in a little town where we had an individual named Ida B. Wells, who was a Black woman who fought against lynching in the South. I share those stories with you just a little bit to give you an essence of my background and where I come from. Yet I grew up in a neighborhood where we were taught to be confident in who we were, and we were taught to believe that we could do and be whatever we wanted to be in life, even understanding that there were limitations that were out there. But what we also understood was the value of connecting with other people, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender or sexuality or other isms that are out there. We were taught the importance of being inclusive. And because I was taught that at a very early age, my race did not define who I am. My gender does not define who I am. My sexuality doesn't define who I am. My religion doesn't define who I am. I get to choose how I'm going to show up in the world, and I get to choose how I'm going to use my voice to be a pioneer for change. So, growing up in the South, obviously, I saw lots of things that I wanted to be changed in this world in terms of injustices. And I also understood that those injustices were not just limited to the South. They take place in the North, they take place in the US, they take place in South America, they take place in Europe, they take place wherever we are. But it's about our consciousness about them and our awareness and commitment to changing the world. So that's what I bring into anything that I do. So fast forward after I left home and went to college, did all of that, I got a PhD in psychology. Why? Because I want to help the world. And so what better way of doing that than to become a psychologist? But then I chose the group of people that I wanted to work with, which was adolescents who were incarcerated. And there I saw differences, even racially, in terms of how people were treated. In the US, what happens is very often people of color are incarcerated for, committing an offense. White people go to mental health institutions. That's not to say you don't have a sum of each in every institution, but what happens is you begin to see this big difference. So I did that for a while, worked with adolescents, loved it, but again, there was this calling. You have to address changes that are going on. And then I got a call to go to school and to become a pastor. And I thought, well, who wants to do that? Who really wants to become a pastor? But again, I honor who I am and what I'm called to do in this world. So I became a pastor and I thought, okay, how is all of this going to work? Being a pastor, being a psychologist. So pastology was formed and sacred intelligence was formed because what I did was merge those two things. My sacred source said, we're going to take everything that you've been through in life, whatever experiences you've had as a child growing up in the South, what experiences you've had as a psychologist, and the experiences that you now have as a pastor. And we're going to merge those things because there are people out there who are hurting and they need you, and you have a gift to share to the world. So, as a speaker, I want you to think about what your gifts are that you have to share with the world, not just the speaking part, but bringing in the best of who you are to be able to address the social injustices that are going on in the world and to be able to bring about racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in whatever you do. Because you have to understand something. I was doing it in my work and I was doing it without going out going, rah, 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 we've got to bring about diversity and inclusion. I lived my experience. So initially, when I came out of divinity school, I said, oh, I get it. God wants me to work with people who've been wounded by religion because Lord knows there are plenty of people who've been wounded by religion. And I still work on that part. But here is what happens. Social injustices do not go away. Racial inequities do not go away. And we have to decide if we're going to use our voices to be a part of righting the world, even in the midst of whatever our focus might be. So for me, we're still unfolding how the wounds of religion and dismantling racism will all work together fully. But what's interesting is Monique said, during the midst of COVID, the world basically had this eruption of conversations around race. And here's what I realized for me is that I had to return back to something that had been in my past, because one thing I didn't say was, while I was getting my divinity degree, I started doing trainings on racial diversity and having that conversation. But I thought I would no longer train in that area once I started to talk more about wounds of religion. Now, why am I sharing that with you? Because I want you to know that your experiences that you have in life, there's always a theme that's going through. And we don't have to necessarily focus wholeheartedly on one, exclusively, I want to say, on one. While we're doing something else, we can actually let that theme just run through. So while I stopped training on racism, it was still a theme all throughout my life. And so it made it very easy for me to have conversations about race, whether I was training on it or not. But it also made it easy for me when the time came to pivot to now return to that training. So that when COVID hit and when this eruption on racism, this conversation on racism hit, I was able to go back, like smoothly transition back into that area without missing a beat. So that's what I want to say to you today, that if you learn to put this as a part of your daily conversation, it will be very seamless for you to move into a deeper conversation when the time comes. So, one of the things that happened to me this summer that really made me stop and think about the work that I am currently doing in dismantling racism is because I had just finished preaching a sermon, and it was all virtual because we're in a pandemic. So I just finished preaching a sermon. It was a few days after George Floyd had been murdered, and my girls were going out to their
That's
first
lovely.
protest. So when they were leaving to go to their protest, I happened to notice that they were getting ready and they were going to walk out the door. Now, if you know anything about hold on one second. I think I was muted there just for a second. If you know anything about protests in the United States, they actually can be quite volatile. So my girls, who were teenagers, 20 years old, were going out to their first protest. So as a mom, I really wanted to go with them, but I was obligated to be online to do a sermon. So long story short, I finished everything. I go to this protest with my girls. I get to the protest and everybody is just standing around. No one is doing anything. No one is saying anything. And my girls go, Mom, go, Mom, get it started. And I'm looking around going, I didn't put this together. Why am I going to go and get this started? But no one was doing anything. So I go to the center of the space and I got everything started, talking to them about what was the purpose of us being here. What would we do as a result of being here? And then after I spoke, each person began to share and they continued to look at me for guidance. And It turns out it was a young woman who had started this thing. She just wanted to do something. She just wanted to gather people together. Why do I share this story with you? I share it because when you are called as a global leader, you have to show up in spaces where you might feel uncomfortable, and you have to show up being certain of who you are in that moment. And the only way you can do that, the only way that you can talk about diversity or inclusion or racial equity is that you have to begin practicing those things long before you're called to do it. Takes practice over time. My girls understood who their mother is. That's why they could say, go, mom, do it, do it. And I have to tell you, this is a side note, it felt so good when we got back in the car and my girls said, Mom, we were just so proud of you up there. But here's the other thing. There was a young woman, probably in her 20s, who was so upset about what was going on in the world that she just wanted to gather people together, and she trusted that the universe would send someone to help her out in this situation. And so, for those of you who are listening, are you that person that the universe is waiting for to help some young person out or someone else who doesn't know how to tell the story of racial equity and social justice? Are you that person? I think you are. And I think there's some things you can do to prepare yourself to be that person even more. And so I want to be really, really conscious of the time that we have here, because I know you might have some questions at the end, but there are three things I want to discuss with you this morning that I think is very important for you to do. And each of those three things involve our sacred intelligence. Our sacred intelligence is our ability to tap into our divine inner source so that we can manifest our greatness and help other people manifest their greatness. So, in other words, you're just tapping into this inside of you to become the best person you can possibly be. But there are three relationships you have to have in order to do that. That's your sacred relationship, your selfish relationship, and your shared relationships. Very briefly, our sacred relationship is the one that we have with our own divine inner source. What is that name of the source for you? For me, I call it God. I call it sacred, divine wisdom, infinite wisdom. I have all sorts of names. So, in order for you to have that sacred source, you've got to put in time with that sacred source, even if it's walking in nature. So I have a question for you. What is the first thing that you do every morning when you wake up? Just for a second, just think about, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? I want to invite you to have a daily exercise of connecting with your source. When we started out and I asked you to breathe and then to put your hand over your heart, that was a connecting with your source. It was also a connecting with yourself, and it was a connecting with other people. You see that? Sacred, selfish, and shared. You did all of that in that moment that you chose to center yourself. Even before you go on the stage to speak or to present via, virtually, you've got to focus yourself and center yourself and connect with your source and connect with the people out there that you are speaking to. See them in your path. Not just visualize them, but feel them in your heart and in your presence. So connect more deeply with that sacred part of you, that divineness that lives within you. And each morning I'm going to invite you. It doesn't have to be a long practice. For me, there's several things I do in the morning. I usually get up and do a type of prayer, and then I read something. I read something sacred. I read something somebody else says about just showing up in the world. And then I ask the question, how do I serve today? How do I surrender to my highest good? And then I'm going to check in throughout the day to ask myself, am I surrendering to my highest good? Because that's my sacred connection. This isn't about a religion or any of that, but it is truly about connecting and grounding yourself. This also helps you to trust your own inner wisdom. Because do you ever have those experiences when you said, I knew I should have gone left instead of going right? That's your inner wisdom already telling you to go left. And you've got to learn to be in tune with that and trust that. That's what getting up every day will help you to do. When I stepped into that circle to start a conversation during that protest, I already was grounded in my sacred source. I was grounded in divine wisdom. And I was prepared. And that's what I want to invite you to do. Practice checking in more and more and more with your source. The second thing is that's our sacred relationship. The second thing is our selfish relationship. So I have another question for you. And I do hope you all will take the time to try to answer these questions later. And that question is, who are you? Who are you? The selfish relationship is about knowing yourself and examining yourself. I want you to think about how you personally would answer this question. And then I want you to think about when you say, who are you? How would the people who know you answer that question? Now I'm going to add another layer to that. I can't help it. I'm a psychologist. It's what I do. I have you to, so it's kind of like your own work that you have to do, right? You have, so I want you to think about racially. Who are you? How do others see you racially? Because in order for you to do this work around diversity and inclusion, you actually have to know who you are. Once you are grounded in that, you can just talk about race and equity and inclusion, and you're solid in that, and you don't have to feel icky inside. Because if we're being honest, a lot of people, when we have this conversation about race, they're like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. All of these things come to mind, right? We don't want to offend anybody. But once we are grounded in who we are, it actually helps us to begin to see others, to understand others, and we don't fear the other. So I want you, when you get an opportunity, to really answer that question, who are you? And then in understanding who you are, you can begin to activate your awareness about race, racism, social injustices. So one of the things that happened after George Floyd was murdered, we had a lot of people in the US who said, oh my gosh, I didn't know things were so bad. We didn't know, we didn't understand that people were still being killed by the police. Well, that's because people are unaware. It's something that's been happening for years. Or people would say to me personally, Terrlyn, I didn't understand things were so bad for people of color or Black people. But when we are aware of the other And when we understand another's cultural experiences, we can then begin to speak about them with more certainty. So, in order for you to be able to engage in diversity and inclusion when you are talking, once you know about another culture or situation, you can again insert it without it even being the main topic of your presentation, because you are aware of the differences that happens in other cultures. You could speak to them. So one of the things that I could speak to, even this morning, with awareness, sometimes we get so stuck in our own vision that we don't look outside of someone else, to look outside and see what another culture is experiencing. So this morning, it's very early here where I am. It's 7:35 in the morning. So when Monique and I first talked about coming on, she said, "Are you an early riser?" I said, "Yes, I'm an early riser. I'll be there." So there's a 6 hours difference. So in my mind, that 6 hour difference translated into this conversation we're having right now would start at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, then there was good old time change. Our clocks moved forward on Sunday. But in my cultural awareness of the US, self centered, right? I'm in my own awareness and not thinking about the possibility that in another country, the time difference didn't change. So in Germany, it doesn't change until the end of the month. So I'm sitting here at 6 o'clock in the morning and there's nobody else on the screen. And I'm going, what happened? And so I realized as I'm sending Monique messages and sending Anna messages, and I said, oh, the time didn't change for them. When we get caught up in being solely focused on ourselves and our own race, we don't extend ourselves enough to understand another culture in such a way that we can then communicate based on their experiences. And guess what? When we do that, either they miss out on something or we miss out on something. Okay? And so I want us to really just be in tune with the awareness of the other. And if you are in tune with the awareness of others on a daily basis, you can use those examples when you speak, and you can just make people aware of social injustices, or you can just talk to people about a difference between one culture and the other culture without it seeming like you're harping on it, you're preaching on it, you're trying to beat them over the head with it. Now, of course, I do deep work in dismantling racism courses, and that's the focus of the course. So you know when you're coming there that that's the focus of the course. But I might go out and I might do a presentation on manifesting your greatness, for instance. So if I'm talking about manifesting your greatness and I'm talking to a group of educators about helping students to manifest their greatness, I can simply add in there something about the big differences with the achievement disparities that exist. I could talk about those disparities at the same time that I'm talking about manifesting your greatness without solely focusing on the disparities. There's a way that I can slip that into the conversation to get people thinking about those disparities and go, why is there a difference? And it's important for you to know, why are there differences? Whatever country you're in, whoever the other is, why? Why does the other show up the way they do? And why do you show up the way you do? That's what the selfish piece is about. You examining yourself to determine how you can show up better in the world. Because it's also important for you to know your impact on the world. Whatever your gifts are, they aren't meant just for you. Whatever you are teaching people has a greater impact. So your selfish relationship involves you taking the time to say, what is my personal impact on the world? So when you answer that question about who am I, you're going to be thinking about what's my impact on the world, because it will help you amplify your leadership. And then because I know that we want to take some time for some questions, let's look just very briefly at our shared relationships. In our shared relationships, we have to get to the point where we are comfortable navigating racial differences. I've had a lot of talks with people recently. I'm doing a presentation next week, actually. We're doing a workshop I'm doing with a white woman. And the workshop is entitled White Women's Tears and Black Women's Anger, because that's a whole conversation that's going on over here. And when we were talking about it, one of the things that she said to me was, as a white woman, her friends will often ask her, how do you have so many Black friends? And I was just talking with a Black woman who said the same thing. She says, I don't have a lot of white friends. How do you make that happen? It takes us learning about one another, being uncomfortable in the discomfort of not knowing one another. So, if you are going to begin speaking about racial equity and inclusion or diversity on whatever level that is, you've got to get to know other individuals. And you have to learn how to navigate their culture. You have to know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So, when I was getting my PhD, I remember when I went to defend my dissertation, I had my committee in there, and they asked me all these tough questions, and then you have to leave the room and you go out for them to come in and tell you whether you've passed. So of course I come out and I passed. So now I'm excited because I'm really officially a doctor at this point, and I'm hugging everybody in the room. And one of the people in the room was a Japanese woman. And I went to hug her, and she like physically went back and recoiled. And in that moment, I recognized, I didn't take it personally. I recognized I had crossed a boundary, because culturally, she was not one that was going to give you a hug. She did in that moment, just because, but not before I noticed that I had made a faux pas. The way that I know that is because I had to obviously have some knowledge about her culture. And then I had to figure out the navigation of that. And so that's what I would say to you too. Learn other cultures. Seek out a friendship with someone who is different from you. And there are no excuses now. Monique and I talked, and we're miles and miles and miles and miles away. But it's forming the relationship. If you're in a business group, get to know somebody who's different from you. Open the channels of interracial dialogue. Ask the questions that you really want to know. And you will be amazed at some of the answers that you get, and feed those interracial relationships. So I'm going to stop in this moment because I want to be mindful that you might have some questions, but I just want to invite you on my website. I talk about there's a free download that you can have, is 6 essentials for dealing with the difficulties of dismantling racism. You can take those essential pieces that I include there, and you can apply them to any situation that you are in where you want to learn how to engage with people who look differently from you, who love differently than you, who have a different religion than you, whatever the case is, because in there, I invite you to get in touch with who you are and to help you to begin to understand the things that are important for you to do for your own transformation. I want to stop, take time for questions and sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terrlyn. That was really, and I see people clapping. That's, so well deserved. Okay, you would get a standing ovation if you were in a room now. Thank you. That's such a powerful topic. And I remember, and by the way, here's an invite to everyone. If you have any questions, just unmute yourself, jump in. I just like to share with Terrlyn. What's really interesting is last year, when the Black Lives Matter movement got, ignited, I remember, and I know, Roger, you were part of the conversation as well. We were actually just about to launch a new professional speakers, launch program where we help people to really go professional with their speaking. And we couldn't start a program because the energy in the room was just so filled with whatever was happening and how people were feeling about it. And so we had like a 2-hour conversation just about that, and it was just so
Mhm.
beautiful. And people really opened their hearts, and we had, of course, tears, and we had, at the beginning, people hiding that then came onto the call. So it was just beautiful. And I love to have you right here, right now, Terrlyn, because I think, again, the conversation is not stopping, and we must make sure it doesn't stop.
Mhm.
We need
Mhm.
to hold a space. We are leaders, we are change makers. We need to keep the conversation going. It's our responsibility.
Yes, yes.
And thank you for all these great hints. And I'm definitely going to download your six steps and 6 tips. I mean, I just, maybe I start with a question, or maybe is there someone else that has a question here? Why don't I open the space? Anyone would like to ask,
And
Terrlyn?
I just want to share that you can go to sacredintelligence.com and you can find the download that's there. And you'll
Right.
see a whole section on dismantling racism.
That's great. And I know that you run so powerful whole programs where you guide people through such a deep dive.
Yeah.
And this is so precious. And I think it's related to racism and inclusion and everything. And it's even going even above and beyond that. If there's even a bigger picture, but like what you did guide us through on this call today is also about, like, who are we in the first place? How
Yes.
do we see ourselves, and how do we actually try to see ourselves through how others see us? It's such an important question.
It really is. And the other thing is understanding that we never ever walk outside of these issues once you're immersed in them. Because the thing that I didn't say, there's so much of your story you can tell, right? When I began focusing on the wounds of religion in the US, long before George Floyd, it seemed like every week we were hearing about a Black man being shot by the police. And one of my friends said to me, Terrlyn, you have to speak out about this. And I said, I'm focused on the wounds of religion. I can't speak out about everything because you understand that it takes a lot of energy to talk about these
Yeah.
things. I was pastoring a church, and at the time I actually was pastoring an all-white church. So if you think about racial dynamics, and I had so much going on. She said, you've got to start doing, work in this area. And I said, no, I know that God is calling me to do this other thing. But here's what I want us to understand. They're not mutually exclusive to talk about things. And so what happened is I simply wrote a letter to my church about what was happening. Then I posted it on Facebook. And then that led to someone asking me to come to their community to do trainings. And it led then even to my own community doing an 8-week program with them, just from me writing a letter. And that's what I want people to understand. I still was working on the wounds of religion,
Yeah.
but then I had to broaden that conversation a bit. When George Floyd was murdered, we had a colleague in the Evolutionary Business Council. I was doing a training with her one day, and she said, do what presents itself during this time of COVID and all the uproar. And so for me, what presented itself was that you're an expert on training people how to dismantle racism. It would be a travesty for you not to use that gift and not to use everything that you know. Does that mean that I don't still help people manifest their greatness or work on wounds of religion? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I can't avoid talking about this topic.
Mm.
So even if I'm talking about wounds of religion, I can talk about social injustices. It's
It goes hand in hand. I love it. And you know what? It's the same with, I think each and every one of us have that responsibility. Being a speaker, we're touching lives, we're
yes.
transforming lives. So creating awareness within ourselves first, and then again within our business, within our teams, with our clients, with everyone around us, right? Within the community and networks we are part of. And what I said back then is we must make sure this conversation doesn't get forgotten again.
Mm-hmm.
We've been too quiet too long. So I'd like to know, like, even everyone that's here with us today, right? I mean, Danya, Melanie, Roger, Wanda, Annalena, all of you, how do you bring that into your speaking? How do you bring that into your work? And how comfortable do you feel about doing it? And what
And
do
I'm
you
happy.
know?
I'm happy
Yeah,
to try to help people strategize
right,
if they have a
exactly.
question about it.
Yeah. So, I'm sure, anyone has any questions around this? I mean, it's such a powerful topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Roger, Vanda, Danya, anyone? Any questions for Terrlyn? Now she's here with us. She got up early, even an hour earlier than she needed to. She's here with us.
Yes.
Oh my God, I feel so bad about it.
But that you actually don't feel badly.
I
Don't feel bad
know, but
about it.
it's again what you're saying. It's like also what you hit me with that example again, saying how little aware we are because we keep looking at things from our own reality all the time. And opening up the perspective just a little bit is going to open the space for entirely different conversations. And as you said, and I loved your example, it opens you stage time opportunities. It
Yes.
opens you another opportunity of, adding an element to your business,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So
Yeah.
Wanda is asking, where do you personally find the energy? It is so exhausting to speak out. Necessary, of course. Yeah, maybe you want to say something about this, Terrlyn.
It is exhausting to speak out, but I don't have well, I do have a choice. We always have a choice. But for me, that energy comes from connecting with my sacred source. And it comes for me when I think about my shared relationships also includes my ancestors. I look at the strength they had to do what they did, and I feel like I walk on their shoulders. And I also feel like they're with me. They're with me in this room right now as I'm having this conversation, and they're like pushing me forward to do this work. So I want to just ask you to just call on all of that energy, but also the certainty of who I am. That's where the energy comes from. So that when people are pushing back, I'm able to continue to have the conversation because I do everything from this place of love. So I let go of ego in that moment. And I don't take it personally when folks say things to me that are offensive, that could be taken as offense, because I see it as they want to learn and know. And sometimes I just let people vent and do what they need to do. And then I just, from a place of love, address what's going on. Now, I would be less than honest if I say I don't get angry about what goes on. Excuse me. Or there are moments I do get tired, but then I just have to rally around other folks who are engaged in this conversation to get refueled. So that's what I do.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I'm very similar to you, Wanda. Also, you know, uh, uh, and the same as Terlin is saying, the same with me. Yes, of course, I mean, building the business and really, helping people to build their businesses and grow their businesses and, really expand their voice to make a bigger difference. That's my mission in a way, right? So at the same time, Terlyn, about 2 years ago, and all of you, I spoke at the United Nations at a leadership conference in New York, right? And it was about gender diversity and diversity, and we were part of a panel conversation there. And again, it was so much, again, the discussion between Black versus white and men versus women. And back then we were hit and we realized that I think our human responsibility is, yes, honor and celebrate diversity, because in diversity is power and truth and, much greater wisdom than each of us could ever have in our own head alone. At the same time, I think we need to start seeing every one of our, co-humans on this planet as a brother or sister. We need to really understand where we are. And I think we've only won the racist battle, or whatever you want to call it. It's probably an entirely wrong expression, but it's I think we need to start seeing each other as a human. And it all starts with what you so powerfully spoke about, Terrlyn, is understanding ourselves and who we are at the deepest level, and then appreciating that in others. And also, starting, as you spoke about, how we connect with from heart to heart. How don't we
Mhm.
only see each other, but how we feel each other, and
Mhm.
speak from our heart to heart with each other. So we launched back then. We launched a movement called the No More Boxes movement. I think we need to come out of our boxes.
Mm.
Okay, at least you need to understand what boxes we are stuck in and what boxes we put others in and we put ourselves in, and we can choose. And then we also launched a movement called the Voice for Love. And
Mm.
how do we speak to each other from heart to heart?
Yes.
Even when we are in front of a big audience, even when we speak to hundreds, if not even thousands of people, again, we speak from our heart. And again, Wanda, that comes back to your question. How do we find the energy? We connect with our mission, we connect with our purpose, and we connect with our own higher self and, the greater power and everything you spoke about, Terlin. But that is
Mhm.
how I find the energy. The energy comes through me. And I use the energy and the message that comes through me and I pass it on. You spoke
Yeah.
a lot about surrender, Terlin. How
Mhm.
many speakers craft a speech and then they stick to the speech because they don't tap into their higher energy and wisdom and power and speak words that sometimes don't even come from ourselves, right?
And I will tell you, as a pastor, that,
Oh,
often
I
I
get to
have
know
to
all about it.
surrender, like in that moment. And,
Right.
and I want to just say something really, just as an example of including this just in your day-to-day talk, or when I'm even preaching. I can be preaching on one topic, but because I might want to help people understand social injustice or even LGBT issues, I will put that in just in one sentence. Why do I do that? Because I'm planting a seed. So I may not, so the church can be very closed minded about LGBT uh, issues and including folks who are LGBT. So I may not have a whole conversation in that one moment about it, but guess what? If I've included everyone in my conversation, I'm already planting a seed so that when I go out and I decide to have a bigger conversation, I've now already planted the seed. And that's what we're asking you all to do in your speaking, is to begin to plant the seeds. So my challenge and my wish for you as you go forward from now is to really think of ways you can plant the seed and start putting it just one line or two lines in your presentations. And then do the work as well.
I'm so powerful. So again, I think we have maybe time for one more question, do we? Terlin, yes?
Yes, yes, we
Is
have
that
time.
anyone else still has a question?
I know Roger had his hand up before, so.
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Yes, not necessarily a question, more of a share, Terrlyn. Just to say, first of all, thank you so much for that talk. And I'd just like to say how much a lot of that really resonated with me when you were talking about not having to be all about one thing. And for me, as we talked about earlier, the thing that drives me is that I'm really passionate about resilience. However, when we were talking about my life experience as surviving the attempted murder, that has left me with lifelong disabilities. And now, as a result of that, I'm quite often invited as a panelist or as a keynote speaker to speak on living with disabilities, and I don't consider myself a disability speaker. And again, let's acknowledge that disability is part of another diversity, as we've talked about diversity today. but just the fact that one of my opening lines within my talk is to draw attention to my disability, just so we can get the elephant out of the room, as I call it, and move on. Because of that, because I'm planting that seed, as you so eloquently put it there, then I'm finding that I'm invited to speak on that. And also on the diverse subject of race, I did feel compelled at the time Monique was talking about when we were starting the new speaker program last year to speak out, because as a leader, people want to know your view on these things. And I did speak out about it, and this was following Meghan Markle's initial comments about the only wrong thing to do is to say nothing. And hands up, I made mistakes. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, but I was a white Western man that had empathy with people of colour. And as a result of some of the things that I shared, I almost received death threats from both people of colour and from white people as well for daring to have a viewpoint and for sharing that. But that didn't stop me having empathy with people in that situation. And again, what you were saying about the shared relationship, as a result of that, I then connected more deeply with people of colour within my network to find out what the mistakes were, why I'd gone wrong, and to how to extend that empathy to find out why that mattered so much to other people, so that I actually learned from that moving forward. So not a question, more of a share, but thank you so much for today.
Thank you. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Lots of nuggets in what you just
Thank
said.
you.
Great. Okay, I think, yeah, wow. Thank you, Roger, for sharing your experience as well with us. And you know what? It's just such a powerful example of, first of all, having the courage to speak up, and then having the courage to not only keep speaking up despite the threats, okay, and possible consequences, but having the wisdom to really then also say, good, if that triggers these kind of responses and reactions, what did I do? What did I say wrong or do wrong? And learn from that. I mean, that's so powerful. And I think, again, it's such a great example in so many ways, so, on our topic today, but in general, about how we go through life and how we show up as speakers and leaders and business owners and whatever role we are in, right? Thank you for sharing that. It's powerful. Okay, Terrlyn, I think we're on the hour, okay, an hour later than originally planned. So thank you for not only getting up an hour earlier with us, but really also for making the time the hour after to still being with us. That's amazing. So as I said, I know we have recorded this. I know a lot of people said even beforehand that they want to catch up and watch it afterwards. So I'm sure that you're going to share a lot of inspiration, and you did with us already here now. And I definitely going to watch it again because there were so many golden nuggets in this. And you will be in our Hall of Fame from now on. Okay. And again, let that become a seed for a lot of people to really gather the courage to step up in a greater way. And thank you for being on with us. Thank you for the amazing work you do. Thank you for sharing your voice and message with us, for helping us to shake things up again, in a loving, such a loving, beautiful way. But as I said, it's such an important thing. And we as speakers are creating change.
Yes.
If we are consciously choosing or not choosing it, but we are creating change. Every time we show up, every time we speak, every time we say anything to anyone, even the way we speak to ourselves, because that then has an impact again on how we speak out there. So thank you for being on with us, and thank you for the inspiration. I invite everyone, okay, check out Terrlyn's website, enjoy tapping into her wisdom and resources, sacredintelligence.com, okay. So we're going to share that as well with the interview and in our session here today. Thank you for being on. Thank you for doing the amazing work you do. And thank us for being on that journey with us and share that with us. And we all are going to help each other course correct things as we go. Okay. Thank you so much for being on. And all of you, take this session, be inspired, step up, speak up. Okay. Take the courage to be and touch lives and be the agent of change. And yeah, we are with Terrlyn. So Terrlyn, you're also part of our Heart Power Global Nation. We're going to stay in touch in this way. And next month again, everyone, we have another amazing guest. But for now, let's focus in the next 4 weeks on what we discussed here today. All of you, you're agents of change. So go out there, speak up, scale up, impact the world in a greater way. Thanks for being on with us today.
Thanks, Terrlyn. Thanks, Monique. Bye.
Bye-bye.